Hi there, this is Ronnie coming at you with a video. And it's a video where I'm going to be requesting for some advice. Almost every Thursday, and I've just come back from my friendly local gaming store, but almost every Thursday at my friendly local gaming store, there's a man who comes in to buy the very latest D&D 5th edition stuff that he can. Now he has bought everything. I mean, if it's out for D&D 5th edition, he's bought it. He's never played a role-playing game at all, ever, before in his life. And he still hasn't. He has bought all of this and he hasn't played a game. I have suggested to him on a few occasions now, as patiently as I can for reasons I'll explain in a moment, that I run games, okay, not D&D 5th, but I run games on a Sunday, and if he's able, he should come down on the Sunday and watch a game. If there's space, I've got spare character, get in on a game, just to give him some experience of playing a role-playing game. What experience he has been through a very large collection. He says he has a very large collection of fighting fantasy game books from the 80s and 90s. And he's moved from there to D&D 5th. Personally, I think that's a heck of a leap for someone who has never played before. Now, there are starting now to be regular Dungeons and Dragons groups, and I think my instinct is to say, see if you can get in on one of those games. What's holding me back is this guy is clearly on the spectrum. I think also he might be a little slow in picking things up. Now that's not, I'm not saying that he's not intelligent or anything like that. Some people learn at different speeds. I think his speed is maybe a little slower than some other people. That's not a criticism, that's just an observation. My problem has been so far that, well, it's kind of twofold. One, I have offered for him to come in on a Sunday. I will run something. I'm even thinking of running a game midweek. Just sort of something different at midweek evening. I was talking to him today, and his problem is, and this is why I sort of know that he's on the spectrum. He said it himself that he has like a mental roadblock. He can't get beyond, it has to be D&D. He's become sort of tunneled. It's not because D&D's best or worst or anything else. It's nothing about quality or anything like that. It's the fact that he's bought everything, I think. Possibly because he's heard, you know, Dungeons and Dragons is just the most well-known role-playing game. It's that simple. And he is someone who has just, I think, has heard D&D is the most well known, D&D is the most popular, so he's went in and he's bought all the D&D books. So when I'm saying to him, why don't you come in and play such and such a game? Come in and just play whatever I'm running, whatever happens to be on that week. He almost mentally can't get through this roadblock because it has to be D&D. My fear to an extent is I think, and I may be wrong about this, and I may be doing him a terrible disservice by saying this, and for that I apologise in advance, but I think there's a possibility that because his grounding is in fighting fantasy gamebooks, which are very combat oriented, I think, because certainly from conversations I've had, I think he's under the impression, and I may be wrong, that he's under the impression that a role-playing game, or D&D, is just a fighting fantasy game book writ large. But then something happened last week that really worried me. I was in last Thursday, and there was a D&D 5th game. One of my players occasionally runs, but at the moment is playing. It's just him and his friends. They just come in, they get a table, and they play. And this guy came in, as he does almost every Thursday. Could almost set your watch by him. And he came in, and he was sitting down with Michael, who's my player. For obvious reasons, I'm not going to mention this guy's name. I don't think it's fair. But Michael's one of my players, and if he's watching this, hi Michael. And he was sitting next to Michael, and he was asking Michael some questions about how Dungeons and Dragons works. Please bear in mind that this guy has had the books for months. He was asking Michael about alignment. What is armor class? This says to me that he is someone who is struggling with the basic concepts of Dungeons and Dragons. Now, it could be that if he is in with a good group of players, he could get over that, and that wouldn't be a problem. My worry is if he thinks that a role-playing game, a fantasy role-playing game, be it D&D or anything else, is just a fighting fantasy book writ large, I worry that other aspects of role-playing might become a problem for him. And because it might be a problem for him, he might end up feeling disenchanted with role-playing, which, as someone who's quite the RPG advocate, I think would be a shame. This is why I have been trying to sort of nudge him towards games that are not as mechanically sort of heavy as D&D 5th, where it might be a nice stepping stone for him to learn a simpler system or play in a game that has a simpler system, so he can learn about the sort of the fundamentals of role playing, if it is such a thing, and from there he might be able to tackle D&D more readily. but I haven't been able to convince him of that, as I say, because he's become so tunnel vision because he's on the spectrum. So I'm looking for some advice. I'm not looking to frog march anyone into a game. I think it would be entirely wrong, and I think it might actually backfire on this guy. But if you are someone who plays regularly with a player who is very much on the spectrum, and I have a couple of players who would probably be described as on the spectrum, but I think quite mildly compared to him. Also, their speed of learning is a little faster than this guy's. Again, not a criticism, just an observation. I think once he grasps the concepts, he'll be fine, but it's about getting him to them. But if you are someone who plays regularly with someone who really is very, very much on the spectrum, or who is someone who can be quite slow to grasp a concept, I'd love some advice on how to proceed. As I say, my fear is sort of saying, hey, there's D&D 5th going on here, and it's going on there, and it's going on there. And him joining a group, realising it's not fighting fantasy writ large, and becoming despondent about it. And I don't want that. I want his experience to be a good one and a positive one. So yeah, I'd love some advice, please, on how to proceed. On how to make it a positive experience for him. Either getting him interested in a game other than D&D, at least to start. I'm not trying to put anyone off D&D. I'm just saying I think the leap from fighting fantasy game books to D&D 5th for someone who has never ever played a role-playing game before and doesn't play role-playing games at all, really, might be too big a jump for him. So I'd love some advice. Help, please. So that's me. Longer video than usual because I really wanted to express myself on this one. And I'll be back soon with another video.